The last thing Parker Grayson expected on a freezing Tuesday afternoon was to be face deep in a snowbank, trying to dig out a stranger's car while his 6-year-old daughter waited inside their rusted-out SUV with the heat barely working. He wiped a sleeve across his brow, breath fogging in the cold air, and looked up at the sleek black Mercedes hopelessly stuck in a snowdrift on the shoulder of the winding mountain road. The woman behind the wheel looked completely out of place, like she belonged in a Manhattan penthouse, not a snowy backroad in upstate New York. "Try turning the wheel to the left," Parker called, pushing his weight against the rear bumper. The woman rolled down her window, her dark curls escaping the fur-lined hood of her coat. She looked flustered but nodded. "Okay, like this." "Yeah, just like that. On 3, I'm gonna push." She followed his instructions, and with a heavy grunt and a spray of slush, the car lurched free. Parker slipped, caught himself, and let out a breath of relief. "You're out," he said, stepping back, hands on his hips. "You okay?" The woman climbed out, boots crunching in the snow. Up close, she was even more striking: hazel eyes, flushed cheeks, lips parted in disbelief. "You just saved my life," he chuckled. "I'd say more like your bumper, but I'll take the compliment." She looked over at the battered SUV idling nearby. "Is that your daughter in the car?" Parker turned. Through the foggy window, little Gemma waved enthusiastically, her pink hat nearly covering her eyes. "Yup, that's my girl. Thank you," the woman said, stepping closer and holding out her gloved hand. "I'm Keira Gallagher. Parker." Parker Grayson. They shook hands, hers soft and warm even through the glove. His was calloused, cold, and covered in melting snow. Still, she didn't pull away. "I feel terrible," she said. "You're soaked. Let me at least buy you a coffee." He glanced at Gemma, then back at Keira. "Appreciate it, but I can't leave her in the car alone." Keira tilted her head. "Then bring her. There's a diner just down the road. You helped me. Let me return the favor." Parker hesitated for a beat too long. His pride screamed no, but his stomach growled yes. "All right," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "She'll love it." The diner was warm, the kind of place with faded booths and a waitress who called everyone Han. Keira slid into the booth next to Gemma, who wasted no time showing her a crayon drawing from her backpack. Parker watched in quiet disbelief. Keira didn't flinch at the sticky table or the laminated menu. She laughed at Gemma's knock-knock jokes, ordered pancakes for dinner, and somehow managed to make everything around her feel brighter. "So," Parker asked, sipping his coffee, "what were you doing on a back road like that in a car like yours?" Keira hesitated for the first time, her smile faltering. "I was visiting someone, haven't been up here in years. Took a wrong turn. Then the snow hit and well." She gave a sheepish shrug. "I'm clearly not cut out for country driving. You're lucky I was behind you. That road doesn't get much traffic." "Maybe it wasn't luck," Keira said, looking at him over her coffee. "Maybe it was good timing." Parker raised a brow. "You one of those fate people?" "Not usually," she said. "But today, I might be." Gemma interrupted them by accidentally knocking over her chocolate milk. Parker jumped to grab napkins, but Keira was already helping, laughing as she mopped up the mess. "You're good with kids," Parker said, watching her. "I like kids," she said simply. "They're honest, and they don't care what car you drive." He didn't know what to say to that. She was right, and somehow it hit deeper than he expected. When they stepped outside, the snow had slowed and the sky had turned a soft, dusky blue. Keira walked them to Parker's SUV, where the dented door groaned as he opened it. "This thing's seen better days," she said gently. "Yeah, well," Parker replied, shrugging. "It gets us where we need to go." Keira looked at Gemma, buckling herself in, then back at Parker. Her voice lowered. "You seem like a really good dad." Parker's throat tightened. "I try." Keira hesitated, then pulled something from her coat pocket, a sleek black wallet. She flipped it open and pulled out a card. "This is my number. I know we just met, but I'd really like to see you again." Parker stared at the card in his hand, her name printed in gold letters, Keira Gallagher. He didn't recognize the company name under it, but the logo looked expensive. Everything about her did. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "I'm not exactly your type." Keira's eyes softened. "You don't know my type." He tucked the card into his coat pocket. "Guess I don't." Keira leaned in and kissed Gemma on the head. "Bye, Gemma." "Thanks for dinner company." "Bye, Keira," Gemma beamed. Parker watched as Keira walked back to her car. She waved once before sliding into the driver's seat and driving off, melting into the fading snow. He didn't know why his heart felt like it had just been hit by a truck. She was out of his league, out of his world. But that didn't stop him from looking down at the card in his pocket again. Maybe fate wasn't such a crazy idea after all. The card sat on the edge of Parker's kitchen counter for 3 days before he finally picked it up again. He stood barefoot in the small kitchen, one hand on the chipped countertop, the other holding the black card with gold lettering that still felt wildly out of place in his worn-down house. The morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains, casting stripes across the floor where Gemma sat cross-legged, coloring a picture of a horse with purple wings. He traced the embossed letters with his thumb, not reading them. He already knew what they said. Keira Gallagher. Her name hadn't left his head since the moment she'd driven away. He didn't know what kind of woman offered her number to a man wearing a flannel jacket with a missing button and duct tape on his boots. But she had, and he hadn't stopped thinking about why. When the knock came at the door, it startled him. They didn't get visitors, not without warning, and certainly not on a weekday morning. He opened it cautiously, half expecting a neighbor with a dead battery or a package that didn't belong to him. Instead, Keira stood on the porch, bundled in a navy coat, snowflakes clinging to her lashes. "I hope this isn't weird," she said, her voice a little breathless. "I was in the area, again, and I figured you might still be around." Parker stepped back without a word, holding the door for her. She entered, eyes sweeping the room with a quiet curiosity. There was no judgment in her gaze, only warmth. "You drove all the way out here," he asked, closing the door against the cold, "just to check on us." "Well, I had a meeting one town over," she said, brushing snow from her sleeves. "But I rescheduled it once I turned onto your road." Gemma looked up from her drawing. Keira crouched down immediately. "Hey, Picasso, what are we working on today?" "It's a flying horse," Gemma said proudly. "Her name is Jellybean. That's the most majestic jellybean I've ever seen." Parker watched them from the kitchen, stunned by how quickly Keira fit into the space that never had room for anyone else. She looked so at ease on the floor beside Gemma, as if her expensive boots weren't soaking up melted snow from the warped floorboards. "You want coffee?" he asked, clearing his throat. "It's not fancy. I'd love some." He poured her a mug and handed it to her, trying not to notice how her fingers brushed his. She held it with both hands, inhaling like it was a comfort, not the cheap store brand he'd bought on sale. "I know this is unexpected," Keira said, straightening up. "I should have called. You didn't have my number," she smiled, sipping her coffee. "That's true, but maybe I was hoping you'd be surprised." "I am," he admitted. "You're not exactly easy to forget." Her expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. "Neither are you." Gemma tugged on Parker's shirt. "Can Keira come with us to the library?" "We're going to Story Hour," Parker explained. "It's kind of a Friday thing." "I'd love to come," Keira said before he could protest. "If that's okay." He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, just don't expect much. It's not the Met." The library was small and drafty, tucked between a hardware store and a diner that had seen better days. But Gemma loved it, and that was all that mattered. Inside, Parker watched from the side as Keira sat cross-legged on the carpet with the other kids, laughing at the librarian's silly voices and helping Gemma hold open her book. She didn't flinch when a toddler sneezed on her coat or when the heater clicked loudly overhead. Afterward, they walked the aisles while Gemma selected her books. Parker leaned against a shelf, arms crossed, watching Keira run her fingers over the spines. "You don't mind this kind of day?" he asked. "I like quiet places," she said, selecting a novel. "They feel honest. Most people I meet are trying to get out of towns like this, not spend their Friday afternoons in them. I'm not most people." "No," he said, his voice low. "You're not." They left the library with Gemma skipping ahead, her arms full of books. Parker looked over at Keira, who was walking slowly, her eyes on the snowy sidewalk. "You're not just here for a visit, are you?" Keira glanced at him. "No, I figured. People don't just drive back to a nowhere town unless they've got history." Her breath fogged in the air. "My grandmother lived here. Until a few years ago. This house I'm staying in, it was hers. I used to visit every summer when I was a kid, then things changed." "She passed away," Keira nodded once. "She left me the house. I hadn't been back since the funeral, but I don't know. Something told me to come. They reached his SUV and Gemma climbed into the backseat, humming to herself. You ever think about staying? Parker asked, opening the driver's door. I did, Keira said quietly, but everyone assumes I belong somewhere else. Do you? I did. But lately, I'm not so sure. Parker looked at her, really looked. There was something underneath the calm exterior, something that flickered like a warning light behind her eyes. He didn't press. Not yet. They drove her back to the edge of town, where a narrow drive led through trees to a large colonial house that looked like it had once been beautiful and was now just tired. She turned to him before getting out. Would you come by tomorrow? Parker hesitated. You sure? I want to show you something, and maybe, I don't know, just talk, he nodded slowly. All right, we'll come after lunch. Just you, she added, her voice soft. I mean, I love Gemma, but I want to talk to you alone. Parker met her gaze. Okay. I'll be there. She disappeared up the path, her boots crunching lightly on the gravel. The next day, Parker left Gemma with her best friend's mom and drove to the house, unsure what he was walking into. The driveway was clear and the front door stood open. Inside, the house was quiet and strangely elegant, like it had held onto its dignity even as it aged. Keira was in the front room, surrounded by half-open boxes and dust-covered furniture. I wanted you to see this place, she said. Because I think I'm going to stay. Here, for a while at least, I'm renovating it, I want to make it livable again. He walked over to the large window. You sure about that? It's a lot of work. It is, she said, but I can afford it, and more than that I want to. Parker turned to her. Why now? Keira hesitated, then reached into a box and pulled out a framed newspaper clipping. Because I've spent the last 10 years building a life that doesn't feel like mine, and I'm tired. He took the frame from her. The headline read, Gallagher Group names youngest CEO in history. That's you, she nodded. I've run my father's company since I graduated. Real estate, tech, investments, I've done it all, but I've never done anything for myself. Parker set the frame down. So this house. This house was the last place I felt like myself. He didn't know what to say. She was a millionaire, a CEO, and yet here she was in a dusty front room telling him she didn't know who she was anymore. I don't care about money, she said suddenly, her voice raw. I care that when I was stuck in the snow and everything felt like it was falling apart, you didn't ask who I was or what I had, you just helped. Parker stepped closer. I didn't think twice about it. I know, that's why I'm standing here. She reached for his hand and he let her. They stood in the quiet, the weight of unspoken things between them, and for the first time in years, Parker felt something shift in his chest, like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The next week passed in a blur of snow flurries, school lunches, and late-night renovations. Parker didn't hear from Keira after their quiet afternoon in the old colonial house. Not directly. But as he drove past her property on the way to the hardware store, he saw the lights burning well past midnight. He noticed the contractor's van parked out front each morning, and once, as he dropped a part-time plumbing job off in town, he spotted her at the lumber yard, arguing fiercely with an older man over insulation thickness. Then on Thursday she called, not a text, not a voicemail, a real call. I need help, she said, her voice nearly drowned out by a loud banging in the background. And you're the only person I trust not to talk to me like I'm 5. Parker didn't hesitate. Where are you? Upstairs, in the back room. Bring a crowbar. He arrived 20 minutes later, boots crunching over a fresh layer of snow. The front door was open again, heat pouring out in waves. Inside, the scent of sawdust and paint filled the halls. He found her on the second floor, standing in what once must have been a bedroom, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled into a loose knot, face flushed. She was staring at the wall where a section of old wallpaper had been peeled back to reveal wood paneling underneath. I found a hidden cabinet, she said, stepping back. Behind the panel, you think, I can feel it. There's a space, and I know my grandmother, she used to hide things everywhere. I once found a whole box of letters inside a hollow leg of a piano. Parker raised a brow, took the crowbar from his side and wedged it into the seam. With a few well-timed pulls, the panel creaked free. Behind it, a narrow recess had been cut into the wall, almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Inside sat a wooden box no larger than a shoebox, its edges worn smooth with time. Keira reached for it slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. She opened the lid. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Black and white color Polaroids with handwritten dates, people at lakes, in kitchens, on porches. A wedding invitation faded to near illegibility. A dried rose. She sank down onto the edge of a covered chair, holding one of the photos to her chest. Parker crouched beside her. "You okay?" I thought I'd lost all of this. After she died, my father cleaned out the house before I could even get here. He said there was nothing left worth saving. He didn't speak. He didn't offer condolences or platitudes. He just waited. Keira looked up at him. I hated him for that, for deciding what memories mattered. "You don't talk much about him." "I try not to." She leaned back, blinking fast. "When I took over the company, I was 22. He didn't even offer to ease me in. Just handed me a stack of contracts and said, 'Don't screw it up.'" Parker's jaw tightened. "Sounds like a real nurturing guy." "I spent years trying to prove I was more than some legacy hire. I worked myself sick. I missed birthdays, holidays. I didn't even come back when my grandmother was in the hospital at the end. I was halfway across the world closing a deal, and by the time I got back, the funeral was over." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't try to fix it. He just stayed beside her. She reached into the box again, pulling out a yellowed envelope. Inside were a few pressed violets and a note in looping cursive. "You are more than what the world asks of you." Keira's voice caught as she read it aloud. Parker stood and crossed to the window, giving her a moment. Outside, the snow had started again, soft and steady. "You ever wonder what it'd be like to just walk away from everything?" she asked. "I did," he said, turning back. "Once." Keira looked up. "What stopped you, Gemma?" She didn't ask for any of this. "I owe her more than disappearing." Keira rose, still holding the envelope. "You ever want more?" He met her gaze. "What do you mean, more than survival, more than just scraping by?" He hesitated. "Sometimes. I think about it all the time," she said. "But then I remember how easy it is to lose yourself when you chase something that doesn't belong to you." Parker walked closer, stopping just in front of her. "You think you don't belong in that world? I know I don't. Not anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes clear. "I don't want to be that person again, the one who only exists in boardrooms and press releases. I want to build something real." "You're doing that here." Her voice was quiet. "Not just the house." There was a silence between them, thick and electric. Parker didn't move. "Keira, I need to be honest about something." She didn't flinch. "All right. I haven't let anyone in since Gemma's mom left, not really, and this whatever's happening, it's not just a passing thing for me." "I know," she said. "It's not for me either," he exhaled, a weight lifting slightly. "Then let me take you somewhere." She raised a brow. "Where?" "You'll see." They left the house an hour later, the sun already dipping low. He didn't tell her where they were going, just drove through winding back roads until they reached a clearing where the trees opened to a narrow frozen lake. The ice shimmered under the last light of day. Parker opened the back hatch of his SUV, revealing a thermos, 2 mugs, and a blanket. "No skates?" she asked, smiling. "I've got some rentals in the trunk," he said. "But I figured we'd start with hot chocolate." They sat on the edge of the hatch, legs dangling, wrapped in the blanket. The silence around them wasn't awkward. It was full. "I used to come here with Gemma," he said, "when things got too heavy. She'd make up stories about snow witches and ice dragons. Sounds like she got your imagination. She got everything good I've got." Keira leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're not like anyone I've ever known." He turned to her, voice low. "You say that like it's a bad thing. It's the opposite." He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "I want to see where this goes, but I need to know you're not going to disappear when the world calls you back." She turned fully toward him. "I'm not going anywhere. You sure? I've had every kind of luxury, every kind of success. None of it ever felt like this." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the way a man does when he's finally sure he's not dreaming. The wind picked up around them, but they didn't move. When they finally pulled apart, Keira whispered, "Tell me what you want." He didn't hesitate. "A life with you in it." She nodded, eyes burning. "Then let's build one." In the distance, the lake groaned under the weight of shifting ice, but nothing moved them. Not the cold, not the past. not the fear of what might come next. They stayed there until the stars came out, and neither one of them looked away. Keira stood barefoot in the middle of the stripped-down living room, the original hardwood floors newly sanded and bare beneath her feet. The walls were half-painted, soft eggshell white, replacing the faded floral wallpaper. Light streamed in through the tall windows, bouncing off the crystal chandelier she'd salvaged from storage and hung herself, with a little help from Parker and a lot of swearing. There was still dust in the corners. Exposed wires curled near the baseboards, a few boxes remained unopened. But for the first time in years, she felt grounded, not in a skyscraper, not in a boardroom. Here. She heard the front door creak open and turned just as Parker stepped in, brushing snow from his shoulders. He looked tired, his shirt was streaked with drywall dust, and there was a small cut on one knuckle, but his eyes found her immediately. "Caught the contractor trying to cut corners on the roof insulation," he said, pulling off his gloves. "Told him if he wanted to take shortcuts, he could go do it somewhere else." Keira raised an eyebrow. "You scared him off. I offered to show him how to do it right. He didn't want the help." Walked off in a huff. She walked toward him slowly, her voice quiet. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." She stopped in front of him, reaching up to gently wipe away a smudge of paint on his cheek. "You didn't get into a fight, did you?" He was about half my size. "I didn't even raise my voice." Keira smiled, then stepped back. "I think it's time." "For what?" She walked over to a side table and picked up a narrow envelope sealed with a wax crest. She held it out to him. "There's a charity auction in Manhattan tomorrow night. I've been avoiding it, but I want you to come with me." Parker didn't take the envelope right away. "You sure?" "I'm sure. My name's still attached to a few boards, and I've been getting calls nonstop to show my face. I wasn't going to. But now I think maybe I should." He took the invitation from her hand. "You want to walk into a ballroom full of people in tuxedos and introduce me as what exactly?" She didn't blink. "Exactly what you are. Parker Grayson. I don't own cufflinks. Then we'll get you a suit that doesn't need them." He looked down at the envelope, then back at her. "You really want me there? I want them to see who I'm building my life with." She didn't need to say more. The look in her eyes was enough. The next day, they drove down together. Parker in a charcoal suit Keira had picked out that morning in a quiet boutique just outside the city limits. He hadn't checked the price tag. He didn't want to know. He adjusted his collar for the 5th time as they pulled up to the hotel valet. The building was tall and gleaming, all glass and gold trim. The kind of place that didn't just smell like money, it practically poured it into the air vents. Keira reached over and squeezed his hand. "You don't have to pretend for anyone." "I'm not pretending," he said. "I'm just hoping I don't spill anything on myself." Inside, the ballroom glittered. Hundreds of people milled about in black tie attire, sipping champagne and speaking in low, polished voices. A string quartet played near the grand staircase. Parker moved through the space like a man walking on ice, careful, deliberate. But he kept close to Keira, who moved with effortless confidence, her hand tangled with his like it belonged there. A woman approached, older, with sharp cheekbones and an emerald necklace that could buy a house. "Keira." "I wasn't expecting you." Keira's smile didn't falter. "Margaret, lovely to see you. And this is Parker Grayson." Margaret paused, eyes flicking over him. "Ah, I see." Parker didn't flinch. "Nice to meet you." Margaret's smile was tight. "Likewise." As she walked away, Parker leaned in. "She definitely thinks I'm your bodyguard." Keira laughed under her breath. "Ignore her. She thinks everyone outside Manhattan is either a security risk or a tax deduction." But not everyone was dismissive. A few people lit up when they saw Keira, exchanging genuine hugs and warm greetings. Parker watched her come alive, gracious, poised but sharper now. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just her. Later, during dinner, Parker found himself seated beside a venture capitalist who kept trying to pitch him a startup idea involving drones and organic farming. He nodded politely, but his eyes kept drifting to the head of the table, where Keira was deep in conversation with a pair of older men in tailored suits. She looked different under the chandeliers. Not unrecognizable, just larger somehow. Like this world had once belonged to her, and every person in the room knew it. But then she looked across the table and caught his eye, and she smiled. Not the polite, measured smile she gave to everyone else. A real one, for him. After dinner, a small jazz band started up and people made their way to the dance floor. Keira came to him, holding out her hand. "Dance with me," he hesitated. "I haven't danced since high school, I'll lead." She did. They moved together in slow circles, the music soft and low. Her hand in his, her cheek brushing his shoulder. Around them, the room faded. "You know they're all staring at you," he murmured. "Let them." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "You're not afraid of what this means." "Us? I'm more afraid of what it would mean if I let it go." The music shifted and he stopped moving, holding her still. "I never thought I'd be here," he said. "Not just the ballroom, with you." "I never thought I'd leave that world behind," she said. "But then I met someone who reminded me where real things live." He brushed a hand down her back, steady and sure. "You really staying? For good?" "I'm selling the company," she said softly. "I've already started the process. I'm keeping a small stake, just enough to keep my name attached." "But the rest? It's time," he stared at her. "You're serious." "I want a life that isn't defined by shareholder meetings and quarterly projections. I want early mornings, renovation dust, story time at the library. I want you." The room swayed around them, but Parker didn't move. "You're going to freak out the entire East Coast elite." "I don't care." He kissed her, right there in the middle of the floor. It wasn't careful. It wasn't timed to the music or surrounded by applause, but it was the moment everything settled. They left the city that night, driving back through the dark, the roads slick with fresh snow. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Weeks later, the house was done. Not perfect, there were still light switches to install, and the back porch railing needed fixing, but it was theirs. Parker moved in officially on a Sunday, hauling boxes up the stairs while Gemma ran from room to room, claiming corners and windowsills as her own. In the kitchen, Keira stood at the counter, unpacking mugs. She turned, holding one out to him. It had flowers on it and a chipped rim. "Found this in one of the old boxes," she said. "Think it belonged to my grandmother." He took it from her, wrapping his fingers around the handle. "Feels right." Outside, the wind picked up. The first real storm of the season was coming. Keira leaned against the counter, watching him. "You never asked me why I stayed." Parker looked up. "I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Because I've never felt more like myself than when I'm with you, and because you didn't try to fix me. You just saw me." He reached for her, pulling her in. "Same here." They stood like that for a long time, the snow beginning to fall outside the window. Later that night, after Gemma was asleep in her new room, Parker lit the fireplace for the first time. Keira curled up beside him on the couch, a blanket over their legs, the only sound the crackle of logs and the wind outside. She turned to him suddenly. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I used to think love had to be dramatic, fireworks, chaos, big declarations. And now," she smiled. "Turns out it's just showing up, every day, even when it's hard." He kissed her temple. "I can do that." She rested her head against his chest. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere," and she didn't. The snow kept falling, but this time no one was stuck. The spring thaw came slower than expected, but when it arrived, it did so with the kind of quiet transformation that changed everything without asking permission. The snow melted from the ridges above Keira's property, carving narrow streams that trickled past the base of the house and pooled in the garden beds she'd started clearing with Parker and Gemma. The trees shed their ice-coated silence in favor of soft, rustling leaves, and the air no longer bid it breathed. Keira stood at the edge of the porch, hands in the pockets of her denim jacket, watching Parker lay down gravel along the path that curved through the backyard. Gemma sat nearby, humming as she sorted smooth stones into piles, ones shaped like hearts, ones that sparkled, and ones that looked like animals if you tilted your head just right. "Gravel guy's late," Parker muttered, nudging a wheelbarrow upright with his boot. "Again, he's not late." "You're early," Keira called down, grinning. "I like things done before someone else has time to mess them up." She descended the steps, her boots kicking up bits of damp soil. "You know, not every job in this house has to be done by you." "I know," he said, brushing dust from his jeans. "But I like knowing it'll last." She crouched beside him, picking up a handful of pebbles. "So do I." They worked in silence for a minute, punctuated only by the crunch of rock and Gemma's occasional giggles when she found a treasure. "Your attorney called," Keira said without looking up. She confirmed the paperwork went through. Parker paused, leaning on the shovel. The adoption, she nodded. It's official. You're on Gemma's birth certificate now. He exhaled through his nose, then stood fully upright, resting the shovel against the side of the porch. She already felt like mine, but it's good to know it's done. Keira wiped her hands off on her jeans and stood beside him. She asked me yesterday if we were all going to have the same last name soon. His eyebrows lifted. You tell her anything? I told her we might. If you're still planning what we talked about. Parker turned to face her fully. You still want that? Keira nodded once. I don't want a wedding because of the house or the papers or appearances. I want it because I know exactly what I'm saying yes to. You're saying yes to a guy who still gets nervous around wine lists. You're the one who built me a kitchen pantry with a sliding ladder. That beats wine lists, he blinked. That pantry was supposed to be a surprise. It was. And I loved it, even more than the porch swing. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You've given me more than I ever thought I'd find outside the world I grew up in. You taught me what it means to be chosen every day. Not for my last name, not for my legacy. Just for being me. I'd marry you tomorrow if you'd let me, Parker said without hesitation. I'll marry you today, she replied. He looked at her, searching for any trace of doubt, but there was none. You serious? She nodded. We have a backyard, a porch. A daughter who can draw the invitations. What else do we need? He glanced over at Gemma, who was now drawing a sun in the dirt with a stick. You want to tell her? Keira smiled. Not yet. Let's make it a surprise. She's been wanting something to celebrate. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, Keira had pulled out a white sundress she hadn't worn since college. Parker borrowed a clean button-down shirt from the back of the closet, one Keira had bought for him for their first Christmas together. Gemma watched from the porch steps, oblivious until Parker knelt in front of her with a small velvet box. Hey, Jellybean, he said, using the nickname she'd insisted on months ago. I've got a question for you. She looked up, eyes wide. What is it? He opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring, it was a delicate chain with 3 interlocking circles. You want to be the flower girl at our wedding. It's happening, right now. Gemma shrieked so loud a bird launched from a nearby tree. Keira laughed from the doorway, her arms full of mismatched candles and a bouquet of wildflowers she'd gathered from the edge of the woods. The ceremony was simple. No chairs, no aisle. Just the 3 of them standing beneath the old oak tree behind the house, the air thick with honeysuckle and the scent of freshly turned soil. A friend of Parker's from town who'd recently gotten ordained online read a few words that no one really heard because Parker couldn't stop looking at Keira. And Keira kept wiping away tears with the edge of her sleeve. I never thought I'd find someone who made me feel like home, she whispered when it was her turn. But then you showed up in the snow, and somehow everything made sense. Parker took her hands, rough and calloused from weeks of renovation, and held them like they were made of glass. You didn't need saving, he said. You just needed someone to stand still long enough for you to catch your breath. I want to be that place for you, every day. Gemma handed them the rings one at a time, announcing, These are magic rings. They make you never argue and always share your snacks. I can live with that, Parker said, laughing as he slid the band onto Keira's finger. They kissed under the tree just as the sun dipped low enough to turn the sky a soft rose gold, and in that moment, everything that had ever felt complicated simply disappeared. Later that night, after Gemma had fallen asleep still wearing her flower crown, Parker and Keira sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars blink to life. You think we'll ever leave this place? She asked, her head on his shoulder. Only if the porch collapses. And even then, I'd rebuild it. She laughed, then fell quiet. I never saw this coming the house, the quiet, you. I didn't either, he said, but I'm glad it found us anyway. She tilted her head to look at him. We should go on a honeymoon, doesn't have to be far, just somewhere with water. Gemma's never seen the ocean. We'll take her, he said. I'll find a place with tide pools. She'll lose her mind. Keira smiled, then leaned in to kiss him. This one wasn't slow or cautious, it was full of certainty, of roots planted deep and promises kept without fanfare. They stayed on the swing until the chill crept in, and even then, they didn't move right away. Because for the first time in either of their lives, there was no next deal to close, no appointment to rush to, no future to chase. It was already here. A few months later, the house was no longer a project, it was a home. The garden bloomed with wild roses and tomatoes. The pantry was full. The porch had a new coat of paint. And every morning, Parker made coffee while Keira read the news aloud in a dramatic voice that always made Gemma laugh. They spent weekends at the lake, where Parker taught Gemma how to skip stones, and Keira sketched out plans for a guest house in the back corner of the property. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the oak tree where they'd exchanged vows, Keira pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. She handed it to Parker without a word. He unfolded it slowly, eyes scanning the printed letterhead. Then he looked up. "You're pregnant," she nodded, nervous and smiling all at once. 6 weeks. His arms were around her a second later, lifting her off the ground as she laughed and clung to him. Gemma ran toward them from the other side of the lawn, shouting, "What's happening?" Keira crouched down and pulled her close. "You're going to be a big sister," Gemma blinked. "Like for real, for real." She screamed loud enough to scare off a squirrel, then hugged them both so tightly Parker's back popped. They spent the evening making a cake from scratch, burned the first one, nailed the second, and celebrated with messy slices and fizzy lemonade on the porch as the fireflies came out. And as the stars blinked into view, Parker wrapped his arm around Keira's waist and rested his hand gently over her stomach. "You think we'll ever get used to this?" he asked. "No," she said. "And I hope we never do." They stood like that for a long time, the porch creaking beneath their feet, the world still and perfect around them. Their story hadn't started in a perfect place. It had started in the snow with bad timing and broken expectations, but it ended here, together. Exactly where they were always meant to be.